Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is CJ and today we are going to be doing things a little bit differently than I have been in my last couple videos. Instead of going into a deep dive on one specific case, we are instead going to be discussing two cases of bizarre and strange disappearances. This first case occurred in Australia and it is about Sarah MacDiarmid. Sarah MacDiarmid was born on November 15th, 1966. Her parents were Sheila MacDiarmid and Peter MacDiarmid, and they welcomed her with hearts full of love. However, Sarah was born with a lot of complications and was very ill. She spent the first 6 months of her life still in the hospital. For the first 3 months, she was in the NICU and she had a ventilator to help her breathe because she wasn't able to breathe on her own. And for the next 3 months, she was able to be taken off of the ventilator, but she still had to be under close supervision. So Sarah was born in Scotland, but her family moved to Australia in 1987. Initially, her parents said that she really did not enjoy the fact that they had to move. She had left all of her friends back in Scotland, but they also said that because Sarah was so friendly, she easily met new friends and was able to be more comfortable and happy with the move. In 1990, she began working in Melbourne as a finance clerk for an insurance company. Sarah's family described her as strong, persistent, and she was always very willing to work hard. On the evening of July 11th, 1990, at this time, Sarah was 23 years old and she was heading home after a game of tennis with her friends. So they headed over to the Richmond station, but by the time they got there, they realized that they missed their train. So they instead had to go to Caulfield and then change over to the Frankston line, which is what they were supposed to get on initially. On the train, Sarah's friends actually got off at the Bond Beach station because that was their stop, but Sarah had to stay on longer to get to the Kananook. I hope that I'm not pronouncing that wrong, but to get to Kananook, which is where her car was parked. And around 10:20 p.m., this is when Sarah was last seen walking from the train to her car, and the area was also very poorly lit. There was also reported to be the type of daughter who would always let her parents know where she is and what she's doing and give them approximate times of when she's going to be getting home. So when the clock struck 11 p.m. and she was still not home, her parents and her brother became very worried about where she was because she was usually home between 10:30 and 10:40 p.m. on nights when she would go out to play tennis. So for her, it was significantly longer because there was no communication that she would be later or doing anything after that. At 1 a.m., her brother Alistair, also hope I'm not pronouncing that wrong, but her brother Alistair decided that he was going to drive down to the Kananook station to wait for the last train, which was at 1:15, to see if she would be on it. And she was not on the last train. When he realized that she wasn't on the last train, he went to go look for her car, which was a 1978 Honda Civic. And her car was still at the car park and the doors and the trunk and everything was locked. So even though this was very, very strange for Sarah, her family, they decided not to worry too much about it that night. And they would instead wait till morning to see if she would call or to see if she would come home before they became worried. And then when morning came, but Sarah was still not home, this is when her family started to become a little bit worried. They hadn't received any communication from her all night or in the morning. So then this is when they decided to call her friends that she plays tennis with, and they also called her work. And her friend said that Sarah was not with them. Sarah stayed on the train to go to the Kananook station where her car was parked. And then when her parents called Sarah's job, they said that she had not come into work that morning. So at this point, her family became extremely worried because this was very unlike her. And this is when they decided to call the police and report her as missing. After they informed the police of the situation, the police decided to go out to the Kananook station where they found her car. They searched it, they searched the area, and they saw that there were blood stains near the car, and there were also drag marks that led from her car out to some nearby bushes. They also found a cigarette lighter near the car that belonged to Sarah. So at around the time where she was last seen, which was around 10:20 p.m., witnesses reported that they saw her walking to her car, and then eventually she got out of sight. They were not able to see anything beyond that, but they overheard a woman yelling, "Give me back my keys and stop fooling around." And the witness reported, quote, "Not a yelling type of voice. I couldn't see what was going on when I looked over the bridge as it was dark and obscured by a bush. Within a few seconds of hearing the female voice, I heard a female scream. It was cut off after a very short time for less than a second. I stopped and looked everywhere, the car park, the station, and the railway line, but I couldn't see anyone." Police performed an extensive 21 air, sea, and land search for Sarah, which included 250 police officers and volunteers, but they were unable to find her. Now let's start talking about the suspects and theories of what potentially happened to Sarah. The first suspect was named Jody Jones, and she was a sex worker, and people reported that she was also addicted to drugs. She was previously convicted of a murder, and she murdered a man by jumping onto his chest with her stiletto heels, which punctured his chest and killed him. After she was convicted for that murder, she served 12 years in prison and was released early on parole. So at the time of Sarah's disappearance, she would have been free that night. Now, Jody was suspected of having something to do with Sarah's disappearance because she confessed to one of her friends that she did have something to do with it. So the friend that reported that Jody confessed said, quote, "You know that up at Kananook Station? I was there with two other blokes and I'm worried because I don't know how staunch they are." The friend said she was in deep because she was in the Kananook and that there were two other guys with her and she didn't know whether they would lag on her. So again, because this case occurred in Australia, they're using some terminology that I'm not familiar with, like staunch, which I'm assuming that it means like if they're going to snitch, because lag means to snitch. There were also other friends of Jody who reported that Jody confessed to them as well, that she had something to do with Sarah's disappearance. And one of these friends said, quote, "As the train pulled away, I saw Jody and these two males following a girl who was dressed in sporting gear. I watched these people for a while and I seen Jody and the two males start belting into that girl near the driver's side of the door. I heard a female voice scream as she was being attacked. Jody came screaming out from behind the car and the two males were following her. Jody was hysterical and I ran towards her. I then saw blood on Jody's clothes. Jody was screaming, 'She's dead, she's dead.' I have not seen Jody since this happened." With these allegations, Jody was arrested and interviewed by police, and she denied them, of course, but for some reason, she was never charged for any of it, which I have absolutely no idea how she didn't get charged for any of this, or maybe how they didn't look into this more. Because unless Jody is known to be a type of person to fabricate things to temporarily be the center of attention, I'm not sure. I have absolutely no idea. All I know is that she was never charged. There were also two serial killers who were interviewed about the disappearance of Sarah, but the police were not able to retrieve anything incriminating. And on the 20th anniversary of Sarah's disappearance, Sarah's friends, family, decided to go down to the Kananook Station where they had a memorial in remembrance of her. Sarah's family also created a website called Not Alone to assist other people to find any missing loved ones who have disappeared in any similar way. And Sarah's disappearance remains unsolved to this day. Today's second case is going to be about Asha Degree. Asha Degree was a 9-year-old girl who went missing in the middle of the night with no trace and no determined motive for her disappearance or for her to be leaving the house in any way, shape, or form. Let's go ahead and get into the details of what we do know. Asha Degree was born on August 15th, 1990, and she was living in Shelby, North Carolina at the time of her disappearance. Her parents were Harold Degree, and I think her mother's name was pronounced Akila Degree, and she also had a 10-year-old brother named O'Brien Degree. Her father worked the second shift at PPG, and her mother worked at Kauai International, which was a piano company. Asha's mother would say that Asha and O'Brien were as thick as thieves. They had a very close bond. She also said that O'Brien would walk Asha from the bus stop to her class every day whenever they had school. Asha and O'Brien also had trusting adults in the neighborhood who would babysit whenever the kids were not in school and the parents had to work. And these trusting adults were her grandmother and aunt. Her grandmother was named Joanne Jackson and her aunt was named Alicia Degree, and they both lived on the same street, like just a few blocks apart. Asha's family would describe her as very sheltered and shy. Now, she was sheltered mostly because of her strict household, her mother and her father. They really didn't allow the kids to go out and do many things outside of the activities that they would do as a family or whenever Asha had basketball games. So outside of class, church, basketball games, and any type of event that the family would go to, Asha and her brother were never really allowed to like go over to their friend's house or have a lot of friends coming over, that type of strict household. However, even though her parents were strict in that sense, they had a very loving household that was filled with an abundance of activities. They were always busy doing things together as a family. They were active in the church, they were active in community, and they were a very tight and close-knit family. So with all of this being said, it really would not make much sense, if any, for Asha to up and run away in the middle of the night. It's also important to note that Asha was terrified of thunderstorms and it was storming on the night of her disappearance. So let's get into the details surrounding her disappearance. On the night of February 13th, 2000, at about 8:30 p.m., Asha was asleep in her room, but because of the storms, the lightning, the high winds kind of spooked her awake, and then she left her room to go into the living room to sit on the couch with her mother for about 30 minutes. Watching TV, and then around 9 she went back to bed. Her brother also reported that throughout the night she got up a couple of times. The first time she got up, she went to use the bathroom, but the second time he heard her kind of moving around a little bit, but he just assumed that maybe she was repositioning in the bed or something, so he wasn't really that concerned about any noises that he was hearing in the night. At around 2:30 a.m., officially February 14th, her dad went into the kids' rooms. I didn't say this, but obviously Asha and O'Brien share a room. So her dad goes into the kids' rooms to check on them, to see how they're doing, to make sure they're asleep, etc. And at that time, at 2:30, they were asleep, the both of them in their beds. So Harold goes to bed. But at around 3 a.m., this is when a truck driver would report that he saw someone fitting Asha's description walking down Highway 18, which was about a mile away from Asha's home. And at 4 a.m., another truck driver reported that he saw a little girl matching Asha's description walking down the highway, and he actually turned his truck around 3 times. I'm not really sure why they didn't get into much detail of that. I guess to make sure that he was seeing what he was seeing, but he turned his truck around 3 times, and each time he drove by her, he said that she never looked up at him and she was just looking straight ahead, like she just knew exactly where she was going. And it's also important to note that these timestamps that I'm giving, they were not reported in in that time, like in real time, someone's reporting, oh, there's a kid on the highway. This was reported after the fact when Asha was reported missing, and then the police were reaching out for witness statements. And at 4 a.m., a witness would report that they saw someone fitting Asha's description being hoisted into a dark green early 1970s Lincoln Mark IV or a Thunderbird or something similar to those vehicles. Later that morning, February 14th at 6 a.m., this is when Asha's mother would go into the kids' rooms to wake them up for school. This is when she noticed that Asha was missing. She immediately reported Asha missing to the police, and 60 volunteers showed up that same day to assist with the search. They searched a 3-mile radius around the home, but they were unable to find Asha. So there were volunteers searching for her the entire day on February the 14th. And the only reason why they stopped later that night was because a hailstorm had rolled in. On February 17th, when the search continued, volunteers found a few things that would shine a little bit of hope on the search for Asha. They found a hard plastic yellow bow with a teddy bear on it. They found wrappers from her favorite candy, which was the root beer flavored Dum-Dums. And they also found a pencil that said Atlanta on it, which was from her family's reunion. And with the bow and the pencil, her family would report that these two things definitely did belong to Asha. And with the wrappers, they assumed that it was hers because it was her favorite candy, and she did have some like in the house. On February 18th, 500 new volunteers joined the search for Asha, but they were unable to find anything substantial. The search team included human remains detection canines, horses, ATVs, dive teams, aerial searches, and interviews. So during the search, volunteers would find a lot of different items like pieces of clothing, socks, pictures, but there was nothing really substantial, and nothing else that they found was confirmed to belong to her by her family. On February 19th, after days of searching and 200 calls out to tipsters, police officials decided to call the search off since they were not able to find anything really substantial. Fast forward to a year and a half later, there was a construction worker named Terry Flemings who found a book bag 26 miles up the road from where Asha was last seen. And since this is an unrealistic distance for anybody to walk, much less a 9-year-old child, this is when officials began to assume that maybe Asha had been abducted and possibly murdered, only because they found the book bag wrapped in 2 black trash bags. There were also a lot of different items around the area, like scattered around where the book bag was found, and those items were confirmed to belong to Asha. 100 volunteers quickly came in to search a 3-mile radius of where the bag was found. They searched for 3 months. The search was briefly called off after the attack on the World Trade Center, but then they quickly resumed, and they were not able to find anything substantial after 3 months, so they called the search off. Over the next 2 years, the news coverage on Asha Degree's disappearance kind of dwindled. In September of 2003, a man who lived near where Asha's book bag was found confessed to raping and abducting an 11-year-old girl and an 18-year-old woman. This man was named Danny Ray Johnson. He was called in and interviewed by the police. He was tried and sentenced for his crimes. However, the 11-year-old girl was not confirmed to be Asha. She did not match the description of Asha. Now, fast forward to February 22nd of 2025, which was literally 5 days from this recording, new evidence was discovered. So at the time when Asha's book bag was, recovered, the items inside the bag were sent off for DNA testing, and those results came back matching 2 people. Those 2 people were Russell Bradley Underhill and a blood relative believed to be a daughter of Connie and Ray Deadman. So Connie and Ray had 3 daughters, which were 13, 15, and 16 at the time of Asha's disappearance. Officials reported that because of the ages of the daughters at the time, they believed that if they had anything to do with the situation, that there was probably some type of adult interference or assistance to cover up the crime. On September 10th of 2024, one of the Deadman's daughters, who was 16 at the time of Aisha's disappearance, was interviewed by police. And it was because at the time of Aisha's disappearance, the 16-year-old daughter was driving a dark green vehicle very similar to the one that a witness reported seeing a young girl being hoisted into. Investigators also said that on the same day of September 10th, one of the daughters spent a significant amount of time on her phone communicating with her family throughout the day. On September 18th, 2024, another witness went in to report information to help with this case for finding out what happened to Asha Degree. This man said that in the mid 2000s, he would frequent a lot of like parties and bars. And he said that around that time, the Denman daughters were also at the same parties that he would be at. And he said on one particular night, he noticed that one of the daughters were bawling, sobbing, and she was overly intoxicated, and he overheard her say that she had something to do with Aisha's disappearance. Specifically, he heard her say, "I killed Asha Degree." He also said that after one of the daughters admitted this, confessed this guilt, one of the other daughters came up to her very stern and angry and told her to shut the fuck up while grabbing her head. And this man, this witness, he said that he was 100% positive that this is what he heard, this is what he saw, this is what he witnessed. And this man later underwent a polygraph test, which he passed. So with this information, and police were able to go in and seize the cell phones of the daughters to try and retrieve whatever information they could. So now at this part of the video, I'm going to go through and read the transcript of the text messages between the daughters. Daughter A said, "I am so sorry, I just said all that. I am just in complete shock." Daughter L said, "It's okay, I'm leaving school." And investigators were also able to retrieve some text messages between the daughters and another woman where they were talking about being approached by law officials regarding the case. So now daughter S said, "They'll think it's our shirt, it's not her shirt. Her mom said it wasn't hers. I don't remember that shirt. I'm scared though. Dad is probably going to be a huge suspect." And then she said to daughter L, "Can you talk? This is a nightmare. I'm like shaking and can't walk now either." Daughter A said, "Daughter L, you don't need to be talking to anyone. I'm at the lawyer's office." And daughter A also said, "Now they advise we should all not talk to them without representation." Daughter L said, "This is going to get nothing but worse. I'm talking to my doctor at 5 to get something for my nerves. I'm just so worried, so worried. I mean, it's a nightmare that's going to keep getting worse. I can see nothing good happening anytime soon, and I'm an optimist. There's no way this is going to be okay." And in the court records, you could see in these text messages that these three women were expressing a lot of anxiety and fear in regards to this whole case and everything that's happening. Daughter L then said, "What's going to happen to me since I wouldn't talk to them? I'm afraid it's going to get worse. Well, he told me it's going to." Daughter S says, "I know, girl, I'm a disaster. I think if they come at you again, you just go and be compliant. That's what I'm planning to do." Daughter L said, "I think so too, honestly. I mean, I want to do what dad says." And officials also approached daughter L multiple times to try to get her to take a polygraph test or try to interview her, but she continuously declined. And records from the phone information that they pulled, it also showed that she had a 45-minute conversation with her ex-husband, and her ex-husband also refused to talk to police officials about the case. So because of the information that they found, and because of these daughters expressing such high anxiety and fear towards all of this, they went ahead and seized some more electronic devices. They're going to pull text messages, calls, internet searches, anything where they'll be able to find something possibly incriminating and get an answer about what happened to Asha Degree. So that is all I have for today's cases. They are definitely extremely bizarre and strange. I'm going to list contact information in the description box if anybody would potentially have any information to report, and it'll let you know exactly where to report these to. As always, take care, be kind to yourself and others, and I will see you in the next one.